All right, good day, everyone. Today is my real pleasure to have opposite of me David Previte from Waterproofing Integrity. We're talking all things engineering, waterproofing, and running a business as an engineer, a businessman, and someone who wants to add value. David, welcome.
Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to having a chat.
It's really my pleasure. Now, today we're discussing a little bit on how you got to the business. So, first of all, tell a little bit about Waterproofing Integrity. What do you guys do, and who your clients are?
Yeah, well, without boring anyone, we are a specialty design consulting compliance firm. We work in construction, of course. We're focused very specifically on waterproofing, as is in the name. And what we do is try and help our clients get the right outcomes. And that can mean a range of things. It can mean compliance with NCC and standards, performing to a certain level, providing an extra degree of confidence depending on what the situation is. We focus on pre-construction design, getting all the design documentation right. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail, as they say. So Get that right. And then once we go into construction stage, we have a good team as well that will go out and be part of the construction process and make sure that things are executed as intended, because it's difficult to design everything perfectly and clearly. So that's pretty much us in a nutshell. We've been doing this for coming up to 5 years now, and loving it.
Yeah. So just a little bit before we get into how you got into Waterproofing Integrity, because what are the most exciting types of projects that you've done so far?
That's a good question. I think so. We've done a lot of different projects. We work on essentially every class of building, except for class 1, which is residential houses, small houses. Our business model just isn't really set up to cater to that. But we're looking to maybe see how we can help out in that space in the future, because there is a bit of demand there. So we work on everything from residential apartment buildings, the tallest buildings that we've got around, to commercial buildings, infrastructure. Because the thing about waterproofing is, a lot of people think when I first say waterproofing, they're like, oh yeah, we've got that in our bathroom, don't we? So that when we have a shower, the rest of the apartment stays dry. Yes, that's true.
You'd hope.
But it's also a part of every other aspect of the building, right? Like we want to keep the whole building dry, and that's something we call, building envelope. And typically any horizontal areas of the building will have some sort of protective system applied. And those are many and varied, and some work in certain instances and not in others, and getting the right one for the right location, as well as meeting other budgetary constraints and all that sort of thing, can be a very challenging thing. Yeah. And that's why, I guess, historically, especially in Sydney, we've seen a lot of failures and leaky building syndromes and that sort of thing. So that's where our concept came from. Was
just to put a personal anecdote on this, when we purchased our house, now that's way over a decade ago, every time it rained, we had a leak in the garage, right? But there was actually nothing really wrong. It actually leaked upwards. So it's really strange, because it was leaking upwards from the gutter. And after several months back and forth with the builder, they got someone to inspect it. They said, well, your drainage pipes are set the wrong way. There's too much water coming into the gutter on the garage, and it actually needs to go the other way. So they rewired the piping, or repiped the piping, and it solved the problem. Is that kind of the work that you do in residential as well, like design how the water flows?
It definitely is. So normally the pipe work and whatnot is handled by the hydraulic consultant. But the great thing, and this partly answers your question, that I like about waterproofing, is that it's not just waterproofing. We don't look at it and say, okay, use this type of membrane here. To be good at this job, you need to understand everything that you're connecting to. So structure, hydraulics, interfacing with facade wall designs, architectural intent, and how it's meant to look at the end of the day. So all of those things tie hand in hand. So as with probably a lot of professions, you don't only need to know what you need to know how your adjacent designers are doing their job, and make sure you overlap and interface with those correctly. But yeah, to answer it simply, waterproofing and keeping water out of buildings is a whole lot of things. It's shedding water, draining water, putting in the right protective barriers, all of those sort of things.
Right. So you've been in this for a number of years, very successful. How many people do you have now working in your team?
I think we're about 40 45.
Yeah,
maybe
so
a
that's
little bit more at the moment.
That's a good growth for a small business. Actually, a good success story because you're employing people, right? So not just like, hey, we're delivering value to our clients. You're actually providing opportunities for people that work with you. What is the biggest transition in your view when you started the business and all of a sudden, you have personnel?
Yeah, that's the thing. I guess I will just say that I'm quite. Waterproofing is a very small space, right? Small industry. A lot of people know everyone, and there's not always a lot of opportunities in it. So I'm, probably most proud of being able to say that I've got these people that now, we've built a company and established ourselves in the industry in a way that there is now clear career paths and opportunities to grow up into this. And I'm, giving people the opportunity to learn what I've learned and stuff like that where it wasn't there before. So I find that pretty rewarding to be a part of.
So you're actually a trailblazer in your field.
Yeah. I guess there's, the way that we've got our company structured in a firm and whatnot is there's nothing like it existed before we started doing this. It was a lot of independent experts, which full credit to them. They know everything they should, but they have limited capacity. Each person's only got two hands, right? When I started Waterproofing Integrity, I didn't, want that for myself or the industry. I wanted to have something that was scalable, that I could say, okay, we're going to do these systems and processes, and we're going to take people that are generalists and we're going to teach them the specifics of waterproofing and be able to grow up into that space like that. So that was a goal right from the very start, and I think we've done really well to follow through and achieve that.
That's just a fantastic business vision, because it brings together not only adding value to your clients, but also building an ecosystem. An ecosystem with people that work with you that can grow in the job and grow beyond the job, to actually setting the national standard, like, hey, this is how it should be done, which other people can actually aspire to as well if they do choose to do that for themselves as a small business. So
yeah. That's exactly the idea behind it, and I'm proud to say it's working so far.
Yeah. Now you come from a technical background, engineering background. You started as an estimator, and then so tell me a little bit about. So you finished your university degree.
Not exactly, actually. Mine's a little bit unconventional, or at least it was when I started doing it, and it was part-time external study, especially because of COVID. That's become a lot more common than it used to be.
Yeah.
But I came straight out of high school, went straight into an engineering degree. I was not a good student at all. I was good at other things, creative things, but not as being an engineering student. So I followed through that for a little bit, and then I sort of decided, well, I'm not good at being a full-time student. I'm going to start working part-time as well. And I was supporting myself, so it wasn't really it was a choice, it was a necessity. So I was working full-time, studying part-time. And when I started getting that bit of exposure to the construction industry, at that point in time, construction management was a new thing. I was like, hey, this is pretty cool, because I don't only get to, have the engineering side of it about how the building actually functions physically and all of that. I get to understand, legal and costs and management and all of those sort of things. So I transitioned out of engineering and into construction management and did that part-time for about 7 years. While I was doing that, I very early in that fell into waterproofing and, installation and then estimation of it. And then this was actually all in Queensland. And then I moved down to Sydney about 12 years ago, continued on that path as far as doing construction, waterproofing, estimating while I was studying. And then, eventually transitioned out of that into project management and quality control. And this is all for a waterproofing contractor, which did design and installation, because there wasn't really design only. Like, it wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
It was, you're the waterproofing contractor, you've been engaged, you're doing the design for the builder, and you also do the install. And it was just all bundled together. Right. And outcomes probably weren't as good as they could have been for that. And that's what gave rise to this opportunity.
Right. So in your engineering job, so you started just purely the engineering, calculating. Did you see that there were opportunities that were coming your way, or were you seeking them out to branch out on that?
That's a good question. I think I've always been somewhat of a high achiever in just out of curiosity, that if something was happening and I would look at what was going on around me, not only my own role and what was going on around me, and I would say, oh, that's not quite working there. Like, what would I do if that was my responsibility? And then I just sort of have a bit of a go at it, whether someone told me it was my job to or not. And I was fortunate enough to, be at a place that allowed me to do that, as long as I was getting it right and delivering value in that thing. So that allowed me to branch out and then, do different things, because there's a very difference between doing costs and estimating and contracts to project management, which is managing not only those things, but the people, more importantly. And then sort of going into that space and realizing, hey, I get along with most people all right, and I can coordinate and get things done. And it's sort of, just, I guess it's out of curiosity on what I could do if I chose to go down that path is why I branched out.
Yeah. So from the Pathfinders part of Trailblazer and Pathfinders, we established with waterproofing integrity, obviously a trailblazer, right? You created new paths, so nothing was there. But with the opportunities that you sought out, like, hey, this doesn't work, I think, optimally. What would I do with my responsibility? Were you a person that says better to ask forgiveness than permission?
I use that quote pretty regularly, actually. So yes, definitely in action, I did that a lot. And, sometimes people get a little bit upset about that. But like I said, I was at a place that encouraged that. If it was, the right outcome was achieved, it was all about getting the outcome, less so about sticking to a process which is supposed to achieve that, but may or may not have been broken.
Yeah. And thinking back about that period, right? Obviously, it's great if you have the right outcome straight away. Learning dictates that sometimes we don't have it always right. What is the biggest learning opportunity for you that you've had, saying, hey, wasn't happy at the time, but I'm happy it happened now?
Okay. I'll give two answers to this one. The first one is that when you're a consultant, and that's what we are in a way, we do the design, but it's consulting, it's giving our advice on what will and won't work. And when anyone is paying a consultant, you're not paying them because they magically know all of the right answers. It's because they've gone and they've done things right and wrong, and you're paying them not only to tell you what's right, but if you're wanting to do something that's wrong, they'll say, no, I tried that and I failed, so learn from me. Yeah. You're paying to learn from someone else. So as far as waterproofing goes, I've definitely done things that performed subpar in the past and had to go back and wear the difficulty and embarrassment and all those sorts of things of getting it right. And now I have the opportunity because of that to say, no, you don't want to do it that way like you're planning. Let's do it this way, because here's the things that are going to happen because they happen to me. Don't let them happen to you. So that's part one on a technical services. Yeah. Part two is more of a professional and business and entrepreneurial lesson that I learned. And what that is that when anyone decides to go from being a technical thing to go and do it on your own, which a lot of people in construction and design and engineering space do, they'll probably learn this lesson as well. And what that is that you think you're working with a lot of people and you have a lot of contacts and this and that, and everyone's going to support you. You've got your advocates in the industry, you work with them every day and that sort of thing. And then, you also have the other people, maybe they're your competitors or something like that you never got along with in that particular, service. It was contracting for me, that you didn't get along with. And then there's also just the people you don't know. So you think you've got the lay of the land and you know how things are going to play out, right? And that's effectively true. Like when you do that, there are going to be people that are going to support you. They will. That pool of people is a lot smaller than you think it's going to be. The biggest pool is going to be people you don't know or people that will just wait and see, right? And if you know them already, they're like, yeah, look, I'll support you once you're successful. Yeah. That's the biggest group of people. And then there's also another small group of people that don't wish you well for whatever reason. It's, maybe it's your previous employer. Well, no, they think they're going to take your clients. That didn't happen to me at all. I'm, very lucky in that regard. Or maybe it's, another competitor that's always been competing against you and they think, and you think you know who that's going to be. The lesson is not that there's those three groups of people, is that you don't know who's going to fall into those categories. There's going to be people that you thought that would support you that just don't. They're very, wait and see what'll happen. This is a new thing, don't want to commit to it. There's people that you thought would support you that you've known for a long time that are actually, not happy for your success and will try and sabotage you or undercut you or do those sorts of things. I've experienced that. And that's the big lesson is not that there's going to be those people, it's that you don't know until you start doing it. I've actually had people that I would have considered competitors 10 years ago that like, oh, that guy lost that job to him and that sort of thing. Now they're the ones that actually recognize like, yeah, this guy was a capable person. You know, we used to win and lose work against each other. Mm-hmm. And now that you're doing something else, maybe there's an opportunity to work together there. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a big learning curve for me, and I think is something that's applicable to all entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I would think so. I mean, for me, from a technical perspective, because obviously I've been doing this work for a while. The first big job that I architected was successful on the face of it. But there was an architectural error in it. So from the application, it just got slower every time you ran it. It's actually a beginner's fault.
Yeah.
You got to learn by making a beginner's mistake. And I always say to people that like, oh, I can't do that because I've never done it before. I said, well, I'll let you in on a secret. When I started walking, I pretty much sucked at it. I kept falling over, right? Didn't give up. So every stumbling block that you have is just a way for you to say, okay, that didn't work. Let me try it again. But what I found interesting is around the different types of people. And once you are making the transition from engineer to project management, your job from a technical perspective, although you're accountable for the overall delivery that includes technical, has actually a lot of focus on the non-technical aspects to make that happen. How did that transition go for you?
That's a good question. And there's one thing I always go back to when I sort of did start doing my own thing and become independent. I talked to a few people and got a bit of recommendations for books and whatnot. And someone recommended to me the E-Myth. It's focused on the myth around being an entrepreneur and whatnot. It covers a lot of things. Very good book, by the way. I'd highly recommend it. There's one thing it says is that any business owner or business needs three things. It needs the technical person that can deliver the service. It needs the manager that can work with people and get things done and coordinate and all those things. And then it needs the visionary to decide this is the direction we're going to be successful and whatnot. And I've always remembered that. I think it's very true and very accurate. If you want to be successful, and I've tried to fill all those roles, and I found that I wouldn't have gone down this path unless I already thought I was somewhat capable in those areas. Realizing that I think is an important thing for anyone that wants to go in that space. Like you really won't do well unless you are prepared to cover each of those areas in some way. If you just go technical, then you might find a little bit of work for yourself, but you won't really get any further than that. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. One of the things that I noticed when I made a sidetrack into the project management area, not something I'm mostly the best at or enjoy the most, because I started managing the delivery for contract. And not so much for the solution itself, because that's not why you're there. That's what the architect is for. Yep. So all of a sudden it's going like, okay, let go of the solution. It is scope, it is contract budget, right? And it is time. Those are the three metrics that you'll be judged on. Yeah. And I can tell you, as a project manager, with anything you learn by stumbling and going up. But as a project manager, if you don't show your scars, you won't be hired, right? Yeah. The first thing you'll ask when you hire a project manager, okay, where have you failed and what have you learned? Yeah, that's a good question, right? Because it's silly to think that one person has ever just got the right answer from nowhere. It's from trial and error in a lot of ways, and not that you failed massively, but maybe you just did something that wasn't quite ideal, and then you try something a little bit different sometimes in an educated way. And that's, I can say, has been probably our biggest strength in getting to where we have been now. A lot of people will often say to us, oh, look, you were in the right place at the right time. You started this business, and not long after that, the regulations changed. The building commissioner's office was launched. Everyone got scared and they needed help and that sort of thing. Yeah. And that probably definitely did help. But what helped more is that we started off with a culture of constantly iterating and constantly pivoting. Keep in mind, a large portion of our growth has been through COVID. I hired my third staff member right as everyone was laying people off at the start of COVID. And he's a great guy, still with us now. Very lucky to have picked him up. But we were growing through that as while everyone was, fearful and whatnot. We were like, no, there's an opportunity here, independent of COVID. As long as the construction industry doesn't completely shut down, we've got our own opportunity. We just need to move in the right direction. And we constantly did that all throughout COVID, all throughout. At the same time, the building industry was changing a lot due to the Design Building Practitioners Act. We were constantly looking at it and saying, how do we now provide value here? And at points where every 2 weeks we had new systems and processes, not brand new, but iterations of the previous one. Mm-hmm. And it's not because it was failing previously, but it's because it wasn't working quite right. And we were committed to identifying that and doing something a little bit better.
So tweaking instead of reinventing.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe that's a constant journey that we have to go. Never done.
Yeah, call it
Never
micro
done.
fails or something like that, partial failures.
Yeah. It's what I would be interesting is, so you started a couple of years ago, from the project management sphere, so senior project delivery management, obviously quite experienced at that time, you've done it for a couple of years. What made you decide like, hey, I'm going to do this now? What was that point that you said, now I'm going to...
Yeah, that's a good question. I was very fortunate in this way that I had such a good employer at the time. So it wasn't something as clear as that. I do remember that I went with my boss at the time to a somewhat of an entrepreneurial kind of convention. And there was a bit of a moment where I was like, these guys up on stage aren't impressing me that much. If they can do it, I can do it. So that was a little bit of an eye-opener. But when I had the idea for the concept of waterproofing integrity, it wasn't actually at all intended to be, I'm leaving my job. I was very happy with everyone I worked with, loved working there, wasn't trying to get out or anything like that. It was like, hey, let's just start this up, and maybe it's a little side thing. All it was meant to do was offer, say, a builder or a developer or an asset owner that wanted to have a bit of extra confidence that their building wasn't going to leak. We had a service for someone that would just go there and inspect it, be an independent third party that wasn't worried about getting it done on budget or on time and that sort of thing, and just have that extra confidence. But then I like to think we'd done things well, and it started growing and growing and growing. And after, certain period, 6 months or sort of so, I had to say to my employer, like, look, I think this is potentially a thing here. I think I've got to make a go of it. I don't want to have those regrets. And, he's a supportive guy. We're still really good friends now, and I appreciate that. And he said, okay, well, how do we do this then? And I said, well, I don't want to leave you in the lurch either. Why don't we do a transition period thing where everything I'm managing slowly ramps down and I can ramp my business up at the same time? And he agreed to that, and that took a bit of the pressure off, right? So it wasn't immediately like, I'm on my own, I'm cut off, I'm doing this. So I appreciate having that sort of 9 months period where I did that. It worked out for him as well because nothing was left in the lurch. Everyone was happy and whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty much how that evolved. And I hired people in that as I was transitioning up. And then we just started doing what I explained before. Mm-hmm. What does the industry want? Where can we add value? Yeah. And how do we build processes to do that consistently?
Yeah. And then COVID happened.
Yes.
And what you just said earlier, well, actually COVID, we didn't slow down. We grew. Is that something intentional, or do you go like, no, I just spot an opportunity where everyone else is just not there? How do you, going back to that time, what was your thinking process?
Well, it was intentional in regard that we considered the situation. And I said, okay, well, COVID is a thing, right? People are worried about it. Maybe there's going to be a GDP downturn. There's going to be less buildings or whatnot. I'm still confident that there's a big enough gap in the market here that if we fill that, we'll be okay. We've got room to grow, even in the face of this other thing that's happening. So yeah, it was definitely going out on a limb. It was committing people, hiring people, full-time salaries. These weren't contract-based or part-time or casual or anything like that. It was full-time people, as long as we seen it and we assessed and had a solid enough prediction of feasibility there, then we committed to it and followed through. And that was pretty much it, step by step. And the other thing around that is, well, how do you grow in that space? The idea, or what we sort of followed was, see how you can deliver value to your client. That's one thing. And then see what bottleneck there is in the business and solve the bottleneck.
Yeah.
That's That's pretty much it. It's as simple as that. And you're constantly reassessing, okay, we've done this now. That's good. That person's up to speed. Where's our next bottleneck here in growth? And we put in a system or a process or a person to handle that. And there are a little bit of side effects of doing that when you're adding a piece on constantly, that maybe after a little while you look back and think, oh, this is a bit of an ad hoc Frankenstein and we need to readjust a little bit.
Right.
But you do that as well,
right,
and you continue.
Yeah, so it is actually very solid business advice for any business, right? But especially for the entrepreneurs that don't have, thousands of employees and go like, well, it actually doesn't matter that section over there is not so productive. It is keep adding value and increasing it whilst you're looking at, doing it at a better, cost base because you're more efficient. So work on those two things. I think that's the most solid business advice anyone can give. And it actually hasn't changed over the last decades, really, right? If you really think about it, a lot of the management book authors, there was one of them particularly, always said like, okay, forget what I wrote in my last book. Here is the new best thing in management theory. Well, actually, it hasn't changed that much not over the last few years, over the last couple of thousand years, except our tools are changing, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing that I would like to explore here is companies that start and started growing during when everyone else is going down, right? And you mentioned a little bit about fear versus confidence. Those companies that started growing in a downturn end up being a lot more successful and even dethroning some of those companies that actually were like, oh, this is the benchmark I have to reach. And then the downturn comes and they all got like, oh, we got analysts, we got shareholders, we need to do X, Y, and Z to keep our share price up. Yep. But in the meantime, they actually didn't really focus on the values that they should be delivering. How do you see that for you as an opportunity, as well as a risk maybe, with the time that we're going ahead in? I mean, there's obviously a very uncertain world that we're heading into. There's definitely pressure on the cost of capital, the pressure on value of the nominal capital that we currently have. I mean, what we have in the bank, is that actually worth what we should be having? How do you see that as a both risk as well as an opportunity for you and your business and all your employees?
I think it's a trade-off that you make as you get bigger, right? Is that you get less agile to an extent. You have people in places with certain skill sets and you can't just flit around like you would if you're the only person there and you just choose to do something new and you just upskill and then just do it. So with size always comes that loss of agility. The question is, how much do you lose, right? Like, because it's a new year right now, first week back for most of our team, and we're embracing the new year in somewhat of a clean slate to say, what can we improve on? This is the best time to do it. We're all fresh in some regard, as fresh as we're going to be. Let's commit to doing this. And I think making that commitment to the agility and not just accepting, oh, we're big and we are who we are now, and that's just it. I think that helps a lot, or that's what's working for us and making that commitment. And as a result of that, we're really reflecting hard over the past few weeks over the break to then implement changes now in looking at, what have we done? What have we been fumbling on? What are our clients valuing? What are they not valuing? Maybe things we thought were going to play out in a way didn't, and now we need to adjust. So we're going through that right now. So
actually almost an engineering approach to how to maintain value and productivity. So for instance, Price's law, Director Solid Price, if I'm not mistaken, said, the 50%, half of the productivity or half the value is delivered by the square root of the people involved. So the bigger the team, the less people actually are productive in that. Is that the approach that you take as well, like more scientific, or you get a little bit of a feel like, hey, this will work, let's try it out?
It's definitely both. Like, I'm quite hands-on, and when you're an owner or anyone senior in a business that's responsible for outcomes, not just tasks, responsible for outcomes, and you're involved, you have a gut feeling on where things are going. And that's, whether your staff are happy with the opportunities and the way things are happening, whether your clients are, whether you're being productive, whether there's bottlenecks here and there. So there's definitely that gut feeling for anyone that can attune to it. But then you don't always only want to go with that, right? Like, if you have that feeling, you want to take a step back and say, okay, let's see if I can put some evidence behind this. What are some metrics that I can see? is what I'm feeling here actually backed up? And then you make a decision on it. You make a decision quickly, and you don't mess around, and you move forward. Even if it's not always the right decision, better to make a decision than live in paralysis.
It's better to act than to not to if there's a big freight train coming your way and you're standing in the middle of the rails.
Yeah.
So back to the engineering versus feeling, right? So now I did some work. I'm not an engineer, but I did work at an engineering company where we were doing testing, hydraulic hose testing. And there were some strict standards that you need to adhere to on how these hoses are stored, how they are, how you crimp them, when you crimp them, which basically put in the fittings at the end, and then how to which standards you test them. And there were various standards, and those standards were quite simple. You either fail or you succeed. And if you succeed, you know that hose is going to withstand the loads that it's specified to do. Is it that black and white in what you're doing with waterproofing integrity, or is there also like, well, actually from our experience, here's the standard, and we know it's overspecified. This is the practical, pragmatic solution. How do you look at that from your business? And what's the expectation in the market?
That's a really good question, because it's part of the change and review that we're going through at the moment is addressing some of that, right? So just to give anyone who's not so construction-based a bit of an understanding, NCC, which is our construction code, is a performance-based document, which says, for waterproofing, in a nutshell, keep water out of your building. Mm-hmm. But then below that, there are prescriptive methods saying, if you put these things in this place, then it will achieve that outcome. Right. And for quite a while, and even in our own operations, we thought that our job was to come out and be the police, and it's black or white, it's pass or fail. And it still is in a lot of the senses, right? But what we've, I guess, come to realize in reviewing what's worked and what hasn't worked is that there is a gray area in there. And what our clients actually expect from us is not just to read something out of a standard or make a design and then say it's either as per that design or it's not. We can also look at it and say, okay, well, it's not actually following the design that was created for whatever reason, compliance or otherwise, but we've looked at 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 of these during construction and after and we know what's going to perform in the role of protecting the structure, keeping water out of the building and that sort of thing. So we can say, well, look, it didn't quite go perfectly because construction's a very messy, difficult business. Didn't quite go perfectly, but we've assessed this and this, and we're confident that it's going to perform anyway. Mm-hmm. And on that basis, we're going to support it and we're going to pass it.
Yeah, it's a bit of the quality definition. It's fit for purpose.
Yeah.
It's fit what it should do. The other thing is, and I think this is what you see usually in government when it comes to policy. Our policy is X. Let's say clean air. Oh, we all want clean air. How much clean air do we want? Is it 100%? Is it 99%? And what is the extra cost for that, right? It's the trade-off. So they never say at the cost of what. In order to achieve this, here is what we're willing to sacrifice. I think that pragmatism is actually quite important.
Yeah.
For success for both yourselves as well as your clients.
Yeah, well, it helps when you look at, well, what do our clients actually want to get out of this relationship? Mm-hmm. Because and this applies to any business or even any relationship in the world. It's like, what's the other person want to get out of it? How do I align with that? Because that's a good relationship. It's a lasting one. Mm-hmm. And it's repeat. And there's never any point chasing new clients when you can just take care of your existing good ones that actually value the service you want to provide. Yeah. There's always the risk that someone's going to be valuing a service that you don't want to provide because you'll end up getting litigated for things that weren't good enough and that sort of thing. There is that risk. But most people just want to say, okay, help me get, what's needed in a reasonable way. Yeah.
So you're actually not just helping your clients, but thinking ahead how they help their clients. So by cutting the corners too far, their clients are not going to be helped, which means not good for your clients, which is ultimately will not be good for you.
Yeah, well, it's true. The cost of building is already very high, right? Mm-hmm. And with interest rates going up, it means the borrowing power of people that want their own houses or apartments or anything like that. They want these things. They want to be able to afford them. And if there's too much red tape in place, regardless of what that means, whether it's development approvals or whether it's over scrutiny for the sake of scrutiny in construction and that sort of thing, you're just pushing prices up and making things even more unattainable and more out of reach
Yeah.
for everyone else. And I like to think that almost never is the person that lives in the apartment building or whatnot, or the office uses the office. They're never our client directly, but they're the ones that we actually help at the end of the day.
They have to live with
well.
it.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
you mentioned red tape, which is actually quite interesting, because the next part that I'd like to focus on is when you're growing your business. Greiner and Kruger did a study, I think, in 1972. But again, I'm once like, hey, if it was true then, it's probably still true now, around the business life cycle, right? So crisis of control and then the crisis of red tape. So when you start growing, how do you see where do you see yourself at right now? Is you in crisis of control, or is it just still growing like crazy and everything, the sky is the limit? Or how do you see that future in the next, now and in the next 5 years? And if you ever get to the crisis of red tape, in other words, we really, everything is chaotic, I need to lock down, get more process. How do you see yourself getting the company out of that and grow through it?
That's a good question. Look, I'd say in a small way we're doing that right now. Like we've been at the same number of staff for around the past 6 months.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that opportunity in a way. Like it lets us consolidate a little bit. It lets us refine the ad hoc way we brought things in and say, okay, well, that was working. What can we do better now? And the answer is to just have a reassess what role you actually play, what people value from you, and then how your business is structured to deliver that. Is there superfluous things where people are doing tasks that do not move the business forward in any way? Mm-hmm. I've been asking that question a lot, and then trying to realign with that. And it's not easy, right? Because no business owner that values their employees wants to sort of look at things and say, well, you're just not needed anymore. Can't fit into our structure. So if you're able to look at it and say, and appreciate everyone's skills and say, okay, what you're doing, I need you to do it differently, do it in this department, do it in a different way, and that sort of thing, and remold everything into a more of a lean, focused machine, then that's what you should be doing. And look, I would intend to apply that philosophy like that's true, whether it's 50 or 500 or 5,000. It's just making the commitment to follow through with it, because mm-hmm. it's not easy to do, especially when it involves letting people go that you value and have helped you get where you are.
Yeah. From a crisis of control, right? So let's say it grows bigger and bigger. You mentioned like, hey, we don't want to lose the agility. What are some of the strategies you would recommend to a company that's going like, hey, we're actually growing quite well, we're geographically dispersed. What do you say, hey, look at these things to actually, separate the control and therefore separate the risk a little bit?
Yep.
Right? Do you have any plans or strategies that you want to?
I think the one thing I would recommend is identify people that are able to be responsible for outcomes and achieving things, because there's a difference. In my mind, there's two people, and this is totally fine, is that the people are given a task and trained on a task and know how to do a task, and they'll mm-hmm. do it very well, and that's awesome. Mm-hmm. And then there are people that are given a goal or an outcome, and they will figure out the tasks that need to be done in order to get that outcome. And in my mind, those are the people that are suitable for handling things and getting that outcome. And then you're less concerned about having perfect processes so people can just follow the tasks, right? If you have a business full of processes and that it has no agility and whatnot. So my advice would be identify the people in your business as you grow that are capable of growth in that way. And they're potentially going to be partners in the future and that sort of thing. They can do everything that the business needs, and they will, then be eligible to get, compensation for what they're delivering, because they're delivering so much value to the business. So figuring out who those people are and giving them space to become that person, because those are the people that leave. They're like, okay, you've put me in this box here about doing these tasks and that sort of thing, and I can do it and I'm doing it well, but what's next?
Yeah.
So they'll go and they'll stretch their legs, elsewhere for themselves or with someone else and that sort of thing. So it's your responsibility as someone senior or the owner that's, I guess, crafting the structure, is to open up pathways for people that are capable, that you want. And all things working out well, then they'll go out, they'll contribute even more value to your business and sky's the limit.
Would you say that purpose plays an important role in that? When you have a shared common purpose, then you have to have less. You don't need as many rules in order how to do things, because your purpose is, let's say, serve your customers, serve their customers better. Obviously, there are some ground rules that you cannot break, the non-negotiables. But how important is it to you to have a commonality of purpose with the entire staff? Or you say, well, in some cases it's debatable. What do you see on that in your business?
I think you're right. And I would tie that very closely with what I was talking about with outcomes, right? Yeah. It's like we want to provide a level of service to our clients that they appreciate, that's correct, because if it's not correct, we have liability and the business gets litigated and all those sorts of nasty things. And I think knowing those things and committing to them is quite important. We've gone through a bit of a branding process recently to do that little bit of a who are we as a company? Not only what service do we want to deliver, but how do we go about it? And talking through that and involving people in that discussion, then saying, look, this is it now. We've thought about it. We've decided, everyone align with this in not only the outcomes we need to achieve, but the way we want to go about it.
Right. Just from first of all, I find it fantastic, right? Because you're not just providing a purpose to, the work that you do, but purpose for everyone that is in the company as well. Get a growth opportunity should you choose to take it. You yourself, you're actually recognized as a national leader in the waterproofing integrity as well. So outside of your company, you're having a lot of influence in Australia in how those standards are tested and implemented. Can you tell a little bit about that, how you rolled into that, and how that actually helps you be better for waterproofing integrity and the employees?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think lean in is the simple way of putting it, and deliver value, right? And people will recognize that. People, especially capable people, want to align with other capable people. No one likes carrying dead weight. Mm-hmm. So if you show that you can deliver something to any sort of situation, then the right people will acknowledge that and want you to be part of what they're doing and that sort of thing. So I guess to explain that, I'm currently, or have been for the past 12 to 18 months, the national president of the Waterproofing Australian, the AIW, the Australian Institute of Waterproofing, right? And we've been implementing a lot of things to really grow that and be our industry body for waterproofers, because it's the only one we've got. So I've been putting a lot of work into that space. But I guess to explain how I got into that was by being successful, delivering value, being recognized for that. People said, hey, why don't you get involved in this? And I was like, yeah, why not? I wasn't planning on doing this yet, but the opportunity's there. Let's lean in and see where it goes. Yeah. And to answer your question about why and what benefit there is to that, I've always said that the right way to do things or to grow into an industry is to try and grow the pie. Don't fight over the pie with whoever's there at the moment. You want to change the industry to grow the pie. And in the way of waterproofing design and quality and that sort of stuff, it was a quite small pie before, partly because people didn't respect it or value it, and partly because the people that were offering those services were a very few and limited number. And so I have no interest. I respect greatly the people that established, that early on. No interest in fighting them for anything. I want to change the way the industry perceives what we offer, recognize the value in it, and then the opportunities go up. There's just more demand, and then we're able to fill and grow into that space. And I continue to apply that same logic now with New South Wales, but also in Queensland and Victoria are following suit. And I've always intended to be a national level company. Yeah,
that's actually a fantastic insight. A lot of people indeed focus on what's my share of this, what's my share of the pie. And in the software industry as well, it's like, well, the vendor of software is better served with better partners, with more competition. The partners themselves are better served with better partners as competitors, because it increases the size of the pie. Because if every partner on a particular software technology is just constantly messing up all the projects, it's not that they will just have less business. The vendor will have less business as well, because no one will buy it, because there's no success stories. So I see it for us as well, like, hey, we actually need more competition, but also better competition. So not only do we increase the size of the pie, we make it taste better.
Yeah.
Right? It's no one wants a big pie that you don't like.
Yeah.
It's improve the recipe, and I think it's just spot on there, because it is. It's not a limited resource thinking. It is like, no, this is the sky is the limit thinking. There's always more if we do a better job.
Yeah.
If you could go back to your younger self, and actually to maybe some people that are watching right now and that are in an inflection point in their life, what is the one piece of advice that you would give yourself, saying, gee, next time, do this instead of that?
Do this instead of that. I'm not sure. I'll have a think about that. But while you were stating the question, there was one thing that came to mind that was very different in my younger self than I do now. And my wife reminds me of this because we've known each other for a very long time, that I always used to say, why would anyone want to own a business or something like that? Why wouldn't you just work for someone and then you could just get paid, do your job, go home and not worry about anything? I was completely that person. I believed it. And I don't know if there was a specific point. Whether it's naturally ingrained in me or however it happened, I just found myself slowly, out of curiosity, just doing something a bit extra or a bit different, right? And then after doing that enough times, I realized, well, hey, I'm actually a pretty capable person. I can do these new things. And doing new things is kind of fun, figuring out the way of doing it rather than just doing the same old thing you've always done. Taking on a new challenge and that sort of thing is actually kind of fun. So that's a massive change in who I am and how I think as a result of what I've gone through and where I've ended up now. So yeah, that would be my advice, not only to my younger self, is that you're not always going to think that, but also to anyone else that's sort of maybe thinking this and I'm not quite sure. Like, I changed completely in that regard.
Mm-hmm. It's the ability to pick on something you haven't done before. The willingness to fail at it, and then the humility to say, I failed, now I'm going to change it, is, I think, the best thing that we have been given in life, that helps us grow as people. David, thank you so much. I've learned so many things, and for those on the call, there's some nuggets of wisdom over here. Opportunities come to you. You will be uncomfortable. You will be pressured, or feel some pressure on it. Like, oh, I've never done it. What if I'm not successful? You'll never know until you try. Don't fail completely. Do the micro failures. Adjust when necessary, and in all cases, keep the purpose in mind. Why are you doing it? I think that's the number one thing that I would take away from this. So, David, thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate it, man. It's been a great chat.